Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Hands up. Excellent. If I speak too loud and I deafen you, I apologise for that, and I hope not to do that, because I think what I'm going to say this afternoon now, I think is very important for you and your firms, and for you as individuals. It's quite interesting. When I walked in here to Accountex today, I saw a very old friend of mine, Mark Lloydbottom, who has a stand right towards the front of the hall. I've known Mark for about 30 years. He's another practice consultant, as am I. And he said to me, and I do agree with him, just about everything you see in this exhibition is about selling or IT, and it's all related to selling things. What Mark's about and what I'm about is not about that. It's actually about taking a step back, looking at your practice, your business, and saying, how am I doing and how can I actually improve it? And the reason I've been asked to do this session is because we're in very changing times now. I suppose I've been doing this sort of consulting work for about 30 years, I suppose. And it's considerably different now than it was even 5 years ago. The reason for that is pretty straightforward. It's because we've been through several different incarnations ever since we went into recession in 2007, 2008. And the market has changed for accounting services. And I'm sure you're all finding that, and I'm certainly finding that. And the important thing to remember now is that you need to put your headphones on, by the way. The reason I want to focus on the now is because the market is completely different from what it was 5 years ago. Why is that? Well, I think there are a number of reasons, and there are a number of influences on the whole thing. First of all, and it doesn't apply to most of you in this room, which is really good, we are an aging profession in terms of partner ages. If you go out there in the market, there are 10,000 odd firms in this country, and I would say of all the partners, probably about 45% are over the age of 55. Now that actually means something. It means something because it means that those people are thinking about retirement. They want to find a way of exiting at some point, or they want to make retirement provision. And that has a bearing on how they run their practice and what they want to do with it. It also means that there is a big opportunity at the present time for anyone who's younger and is looking to acquire or merge and use that as a means of expansion to actually find business. It will come at a cost, but on the other hand, it does allow an opportunity. Because you think about it, if there are 10,000 odd firms and you've got that age range of partners and most firms are small, how many firms will there be in the next 5 years? How many startups are there? Not that many. So we're going to get a diminishing number of firms, but we've still got the same market for services, an expanding market for services. So the demographics actually are an opportunity and they're a bit of a threat for those who are looking to retire, but it's an opportunity for everyone else. The second point about that, which you need to consider, is that your clients are also within the same sort of demographic. You've got a lot of clients who are older and are also looking to do something with their business. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward. If you think about it, your clients are predominantly owner-managed businesses, aren't they? Might be the odd public sector thing, but basically it's owner-managed business. And owner-managed businesses have a defined life cycle. They don't always pass on to a second generation or a third generation. There's very often a closure or a sale. That's going to affect your client base. And you need to know where you are with that and that demographic. The other side of that is that there's a lot more opportunity with that to actually find extra services for clients. And if you're not aware of that demographic amongst your client base, you're going to be on the back foot when it comes to giving them advice. Because the chances are they'll think about doing something instantaneously, not having necessarily given it a lot of thought. So how much advice are you going to be able to give in those circumstances? They make decisions which actually have a long-term tax impact on them, which you could actually help with if you'd known they were going to make that decision. So the demographic is a really, really important issue. So is regulation. We're steeped in regulation, and it's only going to get worse, not better. And regulation comes at a price. It comes at a cost to you. You have to be geared up for it, and you've got to be able to deal with it. The problem is the client out there doesn't think much of that. It's something that's a grudge purchase for them. They know they've got to have it, but they actually don't want it, really, thanks. So they're going to be pricing issues associated with it. And I'm sure in the previous session, if you were here, Mark Wickersham probably covered that in a lot of detail. So regulation is important. The other side of regulation is the impact on audit and with audit thresholds. Because if you look at it over the last 5 years, there are 15 to 20% less firms doing audit now than there were 5 years ago. And that trend will continue as well. And what you might think, if you've got a small firm, you might think, actually, I don't want to do audit. I've only got 3 or 4 of them. I might have a couple of not-for-profits. I might have something in education. I might have a limited company. But at the end of the day, do I need to keep up to date with all the legislation, the regulation, and the training just to deal with those 3 or 4 clients as an auditor? Could I find an outlet for myself whereby someone else does that audit in a non-compete situation with me, and I just concentrate on the accounts and all the back office stuff that I do? It's a thought, but on the other hand, regulation drives us in that direction. Squeeze on fees on profits. It's far harder now to earn a fee, as I'm sure you'll all agree. We'll talk a bit later on about fees and pricing, but at the end of the day, it's a much tougher market to earn your buck. So it's a big trend, a big influence on what we do, because it has a direct impact on our profitability. We've also got to find the right people. Now, don't take this the wrong way. If anyone here is under the age of 35, I think there's quite a few people like that. Don't take this the wrong way. But the thing I've noticed over recent years is that within our profession, there is a lot of risk averseness amongst younger people. People are much more looking at quality of life and work-life balance, as opposed to taking a risk necessarily by owning a business and having an equity stake in a business. If you've got the income and you've got the work-life balance, why do you need risk? And what I'm finding with a lot of firms that we consult with, small firms predominantly, but larger firms as well, there are a lot of people who don't want to take on that equity partnership. They don't want that risk. As soon as someone says to you, it's great to have you on board, you've signed the partnership agreement or the LLP agreement, that's great. You need now to sign your life away by giving a personal guarantee on the overdraft. As soon as you say that, people shy away from it. But it is an influence, and it has a bearing on who's going to be successors in the firm, either coming in as a new partner or additionally coming in to take over from you as you are looking at an exit route. So it has a bearing. The other thing is you need to keep the best people in your own practice, and therefore you've got to find them in the first place, and then you've got to remunerate them, reward them, nurture them, and keep them with you. And that may come at a price as well, because there's a lot of competition for good people. So it's a big influence we've got. IT, that's a major influence. We're all consumed with IT. When I qualified, we didn't have it. We used a pen and paper, that was it. These days, IT makes all the difference, doesn't it? The systems you set up, the methodologies you use, the delivery time that you're able to develop out of that to give to clients, the training you give to your staff, the fact that all your staff are IT literate, makes a hell of a difference to your role as a partner. And the important thing to remember there is it creates time for you. Time to get out with clients, to get out and find new business. It creates time. You don't want to be sitting there in the office working away at a set of accounts or a tax return. Or perhaps you do. Hands up those who do. No one. That's great. I'm pleased to see that. But the important thing is you don't want to be doing that. So you want to be working hard to get work in. And the other trend and influence is merger and acquisition and sale. I mentioned the demographics. There's a lot more activity in the market at the moment, and it is an opportunity as well as a potential threat. You read a lot in the press about the major changes with big firms. Most recently, Tenon going into Baker Tilly. Not quite sure why they did that, but they've done it. Prior to that, you had BDO and getting together with PKF. And prior to that, some time ago, you had GT and Robson Roads. They're the things you read about. The fact is, if you look around locally where you practice, you go around regionally where you practice, there's a lot of this activity going on. If you want to be part of that and you want to make an opportunity out of it, then you need to think about where you might go to get the advice on that. So plenty of trends and influences. And that's why I say, is it time for a change, really? Just think about the questions I posed here on this slide. What does your clients need in future going forward? I know what they're getting now. What are they likely to need going forward? I would suggest to you they want business advice. Your question has got to be, am I equipped to give that advice? And that's a tough question to answer. They also want tax advice, and they want tax planning. Question, am I equipped to actually give that tax advice and planning, or am I purely a GP? I've got some tax knowledge which I apply. I'm good at accounts, I apply that. I can do back office work, I apply that. Well, that's fine. But technology is taking over a lot of this stuff. And a lot of what people need is the advice to go with running their business and making money for them. Your clients want to make money. Now, I would pose a question to you that if your clients are owner managed, so are we as practitioners. And we need to make money as well. And we're not going to do it sitting back and just being reactive to events all the time. We've got to think about what people need and then how we can go about delivering that. Are they getting value? You need to ask that, and you've got to ask, and how do I know that answer? And you've also got to say, have I got a plan in place to reduce the inefficiencies in my business? And we all have them. Whether we like it or not, we've got them. How do we drive out the inefficiencies in our business? How do we get the economies of scale? And I'll cover that later on this afternoon, I beg your pardon. If you're going to take a long look at yourself as a practice and say, where am I going? What am I going to be doing? You need to have a clear understanding about what the practice consists of. And it's quite difficult sometimes to actually ask yourself those questions, but not only that, to answer them. Do you understand your fee income split? Is there anyone in the room here who actually breaks down in their management accounts by service line, and they know the fee income from individual services? You do that? Does anyone else do that? You do that, you do that. You use the software to deal with that, do you? That's great. And you set it up that way originally? Excellent. I think the important thing is to know where the fees are coming from. In particular, if a lot of your work, 80% of your work or more, is going to be recurring, isn't it? Predominantly. Within that recurring work, you may well be billing people once a year, and it's a composite fee. It's covering the accounts, it's covering the tax, the director's tax, everything. That's what it's covering. You need to know where you're making your money. It's not on a composite fee, it's on a service that you provide. And you need to know whether you're making money out of that. That's why you've got to understand how your fees break down. You've also got to appreciate that we are labour intensive, and we are working to a gross margin. And it's very, very important, therefore, that we look at what that gross margin is. And I reckon you've got to be looking at least a 2/3 margin on your direct employment costs in order to be making any money at all. And that's reflected in your charge rates. You've also got to look at your fee recovery levels. There are two ways of dealing with this. One is that your charge rates are high and you accept a lower recovery, but you still get the gross margin. The other one is that your charge rates are lower, but you get a much higher recovery factor. People vary in the way they go about that, and it does vary as well according to the type of work you do in the practice. If you're more specialist, you tend to have higher rates and you look for a lower recovery. And that's where you earn your money. Otherwise, in a GP firm, you're probably looking at 95% plus. And if you're not making that, or there are aspects of your business where you're not getting that, you need to look at why and where the inefficiency is so you can drive that inefficiency out. Lockup's another area. Has anyone in here recently started up, or it's been going for a year or 2 years, no more than that? So the important thing when you started was cash. And you probably set your billing up so you were actually getting on accounts, standing orders, regular cash coming in. And that's really important, isn't it? I know we all appreciate the importance of cash. And as advisors, we preach the importance of cash. But the key thing to me is to make sure your lockup is at the lowest level possible. Fast turnaround of work, quick billing, quick collection. And yet, wherever I go in the country, what we tend to find is a considerable amount of firms where the lockup figure is far too low. Sorry, far too high, I beg your pardon. We're talking about 120 days, 150 days. You've got to get that lockup figure down. You've also got to understand where your risk is, and a lot of that is relating to your terms of business and how they're geared. And you've also got to look at where your marketing is. And a lot of your marketing is going to be related to mobile technologies and IT, I would suggest. So where you're looking for your strategy for success is you've got to actually look at all these points. Who you act for and who do you want to act for? How do you gear up your business? Which sectors do you concentrate on? I would suggest that if you go through your whole client base, you will find a number of different sectors where you've got a number of clients. You don't have to have a lot to know something about them. Which sectors should you concentrate on? Which are the most profitable ones for you to deal with? Is it medical, not-for-profit, distribution, veterinary? What is it? And what services do those clients and those sectors require from you going forward? You need to ask that question. It's a really important one, because what they need means you need to understand their businesses in order to be able to give them what they need. What level of performance do they expect from you? And can you actually meet those challenges? These are not actually rocket science questions, I think you'll agree, but they are the questions you do need to ask yourselves. And what about your role? I think certainly when I came into this profession, which is 40 years ago now, the key role of the partner was as a business advisor. He generally was quite good at tax. There was not a lot of regulation about in those days. There was a Companies Act, we had that, and we had institute guidance in the members' handbook, where we didn't have a standard accounting practice. We didn't have IFRS. We didn't have any of that. So the accountant was very much a business advisor, and he was a trusted confider for businesses, and he knew his clients really well. I would suggest to you that that is where we need to be today. We've been through a whole period of time whereby what people wanted was a lot of straightforward compliance-related work, and some specialist advice. But at the end of the day, we're now in a position where our technology and the way we're organised allows us to deliver that work, that standard compliance-related type work, a lot quicker and a lot easier. So what's our role? And I would suggest to you there needs to be a change of emphasis. Less hands-on working, greater use of IT and people, developing relationships, developing new business. I'd also say to you as well, if any of you have got partners, it's not just your role you're thinking about, it's their role as well. And if you're here on your own and you go back with that idea that maybe we need to change things slightly, you've got to get real serious buy-in from your colleague or colleagues. And so the important thing is you've all got to be going down the same path together. And that is quite difficult, because if you've been doing the same thing for the last 20 years and you've got to change, that's actually quite difficult. It's not the business you knew, it's the business you've got to be. And that's the way you look at it. And you do that because you have some key concerns. And again, I've put those all on this particular slide. Survival is, it's not a dirty word at all. It's what we do every day. It's the way we organise, the way we bill, the way we collect, the way we remunerate, the way we reinvest in the business, and the way we take out and make and get our take-home profit. So we have to think about, first and foremost, that's where we're at. And it's a hard market out there. We've got to think about our client services, our improved operational structure, our relationships with people, and improving our profitability. So just a quick reminder, I started off on this note, and I need to remind you about this. These are the key things, the key external influences that we've got to have a look at. And we're going to have a look at this over the next 10 to 15 minutes. Let's just go back to where you want to take the firm. What's your growth strategy? Where does your future start, if it starts today? And the answer is you've only got a limited number of options open to you when you're looking to go out and market, haven't you? You can increase your market share. You go out and you do more of the same. You get more work in. That's actually quite hard to do, but nevertheless, it's a traditional route. You can do that. You can expand your existing markets. You're in certain areas, general practice or sectors. You can expand that. You can actually find new markets for the existing services you have. You're practicing in, I'm making it up, Chelmsford. Your new market is Colchester. Or you're practicing in Reading, your new market is Swindon. You can go out and trade in those areas and market to get business for existing services. You can also look at new markets, new services. And finally, you can improve your profitability. But there are only a limited number of options that are open to you if you're looking to grow and if you're looking to maintain and improve. Why is that? It is because you've got to have a very serious practice development plan which you can face up to and which you can actually accomplish. And again, we're very bad at doing this. I just asked the question, how many in this room have actually got their own practice plan, their own business plan? In writing, well defined. We've had one hand go up. And that's not untypical. That's probably about 5% of the population in this room. I think the point is, and the reason for it, is because we have to take time to take a look at ourselves, and we tend to get consumed by the day-to-day working and the issues that arise. No day is the same, is it, in the office? If you're in a small practice, lots of different things arise. How do you get away and actually look at yourself and say, that's the direction I'm really seriously going to go in? And the important thing is you've got to get away and have that conversation with yourself or with your colleagues or with someone to help you to do that. And that means you've got to look at your strengths and weaknesses and look at your opportunities and threats that are facing you. And that all comes down to clients, developing them, and getting rid of some of them. The thing we don't like to do, getting rid of clients. And I know all consultants say you've got to get rid of a few, and every partner says, absolutely, I agree 100% with you. And what do? You never do. You've got to get rid of the bad clients. If they're no good for you, they consume all your time, they don't remunerate you well, get rid of them. You don't need them. You can find better clients out there. So, practice development plan, preparation and objectives. Look at the opportunities and threats that are out there. Where do you practice? How many people here practice outside of the home counties? Show of hands here. Some of you do. Whereabouts do you practice? In the Midlands? West Country? North of England? The markets are similar, but they're different. If you're working in the home counties, it's a much more compressed area. I would reckon that probably 60% or more of all practices are within 50 miles of London, because that's where the population centre is, and that's really where a lot of business is. The market has different influences, and they're predominantly driven by competition. The further away you go from London, there are still similar constraints, but there's a bigger area for you to practice in, and there's a lot you can actually do in your areas. You've got to look at the scale of things and the competition. You've also got to have a fresh look at your strengths and weaknesses. And if you've never done this, please take some time to consider this and think about how you do it. Not just about your client mix, but also about how do your fees compare with firms around you? How do you know? It's a very good question. You'll always find someone who will say, I know someone who can do it cheaper. The answer is, can they do it better, and do they get from him what you're going to get from me? How do your fees compare with other firms? Do we provide clients with what they need and we offer, and are we prospecting readily enough out there in the market? And who do you retain? I'm sure most of you, hands up those who've done this exercise. 2 or 3 hands go up. If you've never done this, do please go back and over the weekend, just get a printout of all your clients for the last 12 months and just go down and rate them. What do you think of them? Because it's quite significant, this. You'll always find that you've got some really good top-end clients. They provide all the fees, all the services. They provide referrals. They're the ones you want to deal with. They provide you with the interesting work. At the other end of the scale, you find the 10% or so of clients who are more problem than they're worth. Why have them? Get rid of them. If you've never done this exercise, do it. There's one thing you take away from this exhibition. It is, how do I rate my clients? And that's the thing about exhibitions. There are so many influences coming in. There are so many ideas. You just need to take away a couple of simple ones about, how am I actually going to deal with my own business? How do I deal with it? And you can start by getting rid of a few. I can tell you that. And you'll feel happier for doing that. And any of you who've got staff, just ask them, who should we get rid of? And they will tell you straight away, because they're the ones who know. Now, I don't know how many of you went to the Olympics in 2012. I certainly did. I had a couple of days there, and I found it a fantastic experience. Very, very uplifting. But one of the big messages I did take away was British cycling. And this is the head of cycling, Dave Brailsford. This was his message. Do you remember this? If you break everything down that goes into riding a bike, and then improve it all by 1%, you'll get a significant increase when you put it all together. And just think about your practice and how that's applicable. Where are all the micro increases and improvements you can make in your firm that makes it more profitable? And believe me, there are a lot of them about there. It's not just down to how much you charge, you know. It's how you organise. It's how you get the best out of people. Have you got the best IT in place to allow you to deliver work quicker? Are you getting it out the door? Have you got a credit controller? Doesn't matter. Have you trained your staff? Are they familiar with what they need to do? Do people sit around the office idle at any time? All these can be your 1% increases to make it better. And when you're looking to improve your practice, this is basically what you've got to do. You've got to make those improvements. And it all comes down as well to, what do you know? Is all your work profitable? All these questions. Can you make it profitable? If not, why not? Are your clients profitable? How do you know they are? How do you measure it? Significant questions that you need to cover. And just have a further think about what clients actually need from you. I've tried to break this down into a slightly different format, because I'm looking at it from the point of view of what are the major services we provide. It's all assurance-led, isn't it? It's all compliance-based. That's the 80% or more of what we do. These are what we used to call, some still do, type 1 services. Everything that the clients actually need to have, but they don't want. And that is a grudge purchase, and that has a price. That is a commodity. That means your fee is not worth a lot. On the other hand, you've got to charge it. You've got to find a way of organising this to make a slightly better return on that 80% of fee income, which is your recurring fee income. But the rest of these things, performance improvement, retention of profit, and protection of wealth, these are all your type 2 services. This is where people will pay you for actually taking the advice and realising not only do they need it, they actually want it, and they're grateful for it. And you've got to consider very carefully how much you actually charge them in these circumstances. At Kato, we have a client, small firm, 3 or 4 partners doing a couple of million. And we were there last year, and they'd recently taken over a UK subsidiary of a European-owned firm. And they'd realised, because the work had been done very badly previously, they saw a big opportunity for a tax repayment to come into this business. And they actually went through the process. Wasn't rocket science for them, and they saved this business $300,000 in tax, and that's what they were getting back. And the question they posed to us when we went to visit them was, we've been having a chat about how much we charge them, and we're not sure how much we should charge them for recovering $300,000 in tax. So I said to them, well, okay, what are you thinking of then? And the managing partner said, well, one of my colleagues thinks it's got to be at least what's on the time clock, which is only about £1,500 to £2,000. What do you think? I said. He said, well, I think it's premium rates. It's got to be at least double what's on the clock, £3,000 to £4,000. What do you think? He said. I said, well, I can only tell you the experience we have seeing firms all over the country, and the likelihood is that a tax specialist will be charging somewhere in the region of about 10% of the tax saved. The managing partner's jaw dropped at that, and he said, oh, okay, we'd better have another chat then. And that was that. The following month we went back to carry on our work with them, and he said, we did bill them, you know. How much? I said. 12,500, he said. And what happened? I said. He said they were really grateful and they paid immediately. And I said, and what does that tell you? And he said, we didn't charge enough. Now, it's a story to make a point, and that's the point you need to bear in mind, because if you're looking at anything in this area that's of value to the client, you think very seriously about what you bill. Sometimes the client will take a big intake of breath, appreciate what you've done, and he'll just write the check out straight away. So be very careful with that, but think about what clients want. And think about this whole area of how you leverage your work. I call this the 80% annuity. This is the 80 or 90% of your work, which is compliance, recurring work every year. Aren't we lucky to have it? That's why it's an annuity. Every year it turns up. Every year it's there. Lawyers don't get that opportunity. That's maybe why they can seem to be able to charge 5 times what we do and get away with it. But at the end of the day, that's our annuity. How do we make it work better for us? And the answer is we've got to manage our compliance and regulated work smarter. We've got to invest in IT and reduce our production costs. That investment will repay you year after year. We've got to invest in IT and increase our efficiency. Do the work, get it out the door. We've got to improve our recruitment and retention and our turnaround time. A client of mine in the north of England, I was speaking to at the beginning of the year, and they did an exercise at the end of 2012 to look at what their average turnaround time was for their average client case. Average fee, probably about £1,500, set of accounts, tax returns, VAT, that sort of thing. And they reckoned their turnaround time was 8 weeks, from the time the records came in to the time they got it out and billed it. How can we improve that, they said. And they put a program in place to improve it. What did they get it down to over 12 months? 5 weeks. What do you think that did to their cash flow? What do you think that did to creating the opportunity to do more work, to get more work in? Phenomenal amount. So you've got to look at that in relation to this to leverage your GRF. Because what you want to spend your time on is doing the really remunerative work, which is all that type 2 added value business advisory work. No question. So again, you need to know where your profit's coming from in the firm. It's not just a P&L account. Just think where it all goes to. In this particular practice, client of ours, quite a nice return at the end of the day, acceptable return, but where does it come from? Tax consulting. They get a 100% plus recovery on tax consulting work, no question. They don't on the rest of it. If they weren't doing this, they wouldn't be earning so well. But they are doing that, and you've got to think, what's our mix? Where do we get our extra value from? Where's our super profit coming from? Because if we can maintain and improve super profit, we're going to earn tolerably well. And again, for those of you who haven't done this, it's not a rocket science exercise. You've got to give yourself targets. If you're a sole prac, give yourself a target. If you've got partners, give yourselves targets and make yourselves accountable for them. The whole thing about targets is they're there to be met, and they're not easy. And they're not easy because you want to not only make them, but improve them. And they're not easy because if you budget around these targets and you fail to perform to target, you're going to lose money, aren't you? As sure as eggs are eggs, that's what you're going to do. Why? Pretty straightforward, really. You're going to cover your overheads, but you won't have enough left to give you the profit that you wish to earn. So you've got to be very careful about the targets that you set and how you monitor them and how you deal with them. But then we come to what you do when you bill. Now, I would reckon that all of you in this room, in some way, shape or form, charge what you would call, or what I would call a composite fee, and what you would call a fixed fee. And one of the problems with fixed fees is that we don't actually negotiate what the fixed fee covers and get it set out in our engagement terms. So the client is left thinking every bit of advice he gets from you is covered by that fee. And the important thing is, if you've got a fixed fee to cover compliance work, ring fence it, we make sure your terms of business are very, very clear, and all the additional work you cover by additional terms as and when you need to do it. That's fair enough. What you tend to do, though, even when you're negotiating a fixed fee, is to discount. You discount the fee when you're quoting. You discount by failing to record all your chargeable time. And even when you're on a fixed fee, you may say, I don't keep time records. Well, how do you know what the job costs? How do you know whether you're making money or not? You don't. And then you discount by writing off time when you bill. You can't go down and have that triple whammy. If the future's going to start and you're going to grow, you've got to get rid of that. So here's a question. How much would your fees improve if all these 4 things applied to you going forward? You increase your charge rates by £10 an hour. You recover that when you bill. All your fee earners charge an extra half an hour a day, chargeable time, and you reduce your write-offs by 50%. I don't know whether you can do a mental calculation now, and I'm not asking you to. What I am asking you to do is to think about that, and think about that when you're wandering around the rest of the exhibition today, because this is where you get your incremental improvements. This is your Dave Brailsford moment, and that's what you've got to remember. I won't go into fees because that's been covered. I'll go into a little bit about structure and management and the organisation of that, because I want to get back to this final thing here, which is where you earn your profit from. The thing about the way you organise is we've all got a number of options open to us. A lot of you will be limited. How many are limited companies in the room? LLPs, anyone? No one's an LLP. Rest of you are what? Sole traders in partnership? Okay. That's about the right sort of mix we get. But you have got options, and you can trade in different ways. And the important thing is to find the right option for you and the business that you're in, and the right way you can extract profit and to minimise your risk. You've also got to look at the way you organise what you do and how you do it. And that's your factory floor, and organising that 80% recurring element, because you've got to get back to how do I earn my money? And this is a straightforward equation which has been here since Adam was a lad and since accountancy was invented as a profession. You've got to look at your partner staff ratio, the hours that you put in on average, your charge rate, your recovery and your margin. And you put it all together and that gives you your profit. If you can't provide any of these elements, how do you know you're earning what you should be earning? And if you're going to grow and invest in your future, you need to know what that is. I haven't really got time to cover this particular firm's 5-year plan. And I would like to do that at some point, and maybe I can do that individually afterwards. But let me just tell you that this was a firm that was set out to grow over 5 years by about 10% in fee terms, but 15% in profit terms. Well, it's 3 years down that path now, and it's well on track to cater for that. It had got 3 offices. It set out to have 4. It wanted to make sure that all those offices were within 1 hour's travelling time of one another, so that there could be a lot more interchange of staff and a lot more interchange of work. And that way they could cover an area and market to it very successfully. They invested in IT. They also took a view that one of the things that they absolutely loved was auditing. Now, there's a lot of blank looks in the room, and I'm quite sure that's the case, because I'm really glad I gave it up when I was a young man. But on the other hand, auditing is a service which people have to have. And if you're good at it, you can actually make money out of it. And what this firm did was to say, we want it, we want more of it. And they've actually gained work from smaller practices by saying, we'll do that compliance work for you. We'll have a non-compete with you. We'll do that compliance work. You carry on, you do the accounts. You're good at that. Your client wants that, but we'll do the audit. And they built up that way. They've also been out and they've taken advantage of their techniques and their abilities. And the average audit fee that they're now winning is £20,000 a year, which is significant fees. There's more to it in that plan, but I mean, the point I'm making is they actually set it out, agreed it amongst the 8 partners, and they've gone for it, and it's working. I think that's what you need to do, and that's where you need to get to. And I'm just going to leave you with this last slide about how you can build your own value and how you can think about it. This is quite a difficult session because in 45 minutes you can only scratch at the surface of this subject. What I've tried to do is to give you a few thoughts about your firms. I'm not sure when you go around here today that you're going to find anything which will actually talk to you about the organisation and development of your firm in the same way. And I think you need to consider, as you walk around, what it is that you have and where you want to take it. Because the next 5 years will see significant changes in our profession. Less firms, more IT, more demanding clients, more opportunities to give new services to existing and new clients. And I'd like you to be able to take advantage of all that and to really benefit from going down that route. Because I do believe a strategic approach is important for you. And when only one hand went up, right at the start of here, one hand went up with a business plan. That means there's a lot of development time that's needed amongst the rest of you. And I'm not saying that in a nasty way, I'm just making an observation. And with that, I'd just like to say thanks very much for being very attentive. It's very difficult to have questions in here, it's too noisy. But I do hope you gained something from today's session. Thanks very much.